Hello and welcome back to Comics Over Time. This season, which we're calling Murdock and Marvel, a history of Marvel Comics starring Daredevil, we're breaking down the year in the comic book industry in two parts. In part one, we'll look at the state of the comic book industry as a whole, as well as what things were going on in society that may have impacted the comic book industry during that year. We'll talk big picture about what's going on at DC and independent comics, then we'll shift our focus to Marvel. We'll look at who is creating comics, what new characters or storylines were introduced, and which comics debuted or ended. In part two, we'll dive deep into Marvel's longest-running characters, Matt Murdock. We'll look at what the year had in store for the Man Without Fear, key things that happened, and who joined or left his world before spotlighting one key issue or story. From there, we'll wrap up the year's discussion with a takeaway before moving on to another year and a whole new discussion. We're excited to have you join us on a trip through comic book history. We are back with part two of our 2012 discussion, the year in Daredevil. My name is Dwayne, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Dan. Dan, how you doing this week?
Doing great. Looking forward to talking about some award-winning comic books this week.
Yeah, yes, we are. We are hips deep, I guess, in the Mark Waid run that has been Eisner Award winner. They even marked it on at least one, if not several, of the books this year, saying, "Hey, this is a good book. You should enjoy it." And I say that because I wasn't enjoying some of the first books that Mark Waid did last year. But this year, I think I enjoyed them a little bit more. So that is so we have that going for us.
Being told that you're supposed to enjoy them evidently works.
Yes,
so
yes. There you go.
All right.
Before we jump in and start talking about Daredevil, I do want to mention that we got a little reader mail from friend of the show, Amanda, who's reached out to us a few times before. She was commenting about the kind of what's next that we asked about a few weeks ago. We're brainstorming different ideas as to where we might go once we reach current day Daredevil and what we might do next. She was talking, she had two thoughts in the email. One was looking at villains and specifically focusing on different villains and finding comic books to talk about that. She says, right now I'm watching the Jessica Jones Netflix show and I find Kilgrave absolutely terrifying. Yes, David Tennant as Kilgrave was absolutely terrifying in Jessica Jones.
Yes. To my knowledge, there is no place in the comics where Kilgrave comes even close to being what he is in that show.
Yes.
But he might. There are some later ones appearances that are kind of derived off it, but I haven't read. So maybe later on he gets there. Early Kilgrave is kind of just a joke compared to his work on the show there. So
yeah, it's a little funny, but at the same time, like I think the idea of Kilgrave, like his powers and what he could potentially do and the havoc he could cause, is terrifying. And I think they I think really did a great job of proving that with the Netflix show. Like they took the idea of this character that has this really kind of terrifying ability and kind of turned it up to 11 and was like, here, this is what somebody with this power could do. And it is frightening to put it mildly. Amanda's other suggestion was maybe focusing on creators. You guys seem to love Bendis on Daredevil, but from what I've read, a lot of people really dislike him on, say, Moon Knight. What defines his style? What are his best stories? What makes someone great on something and blah on something else? This actually kind of interested me a little bit. If nothing else, I don't know if a full season could warrant it, but I think taking a few weeks and looking at a few different creators on a few different books would be kind of an interesting way of going about it.
Yeah, we've mentioned a few of them, but there's people like Brian Azzarello who are fantastic on some characters and terrible on others, and there are people who, they get hired to try something and it just doesn't work. Terry Moore, one of my favorite creators, done Strangers in Paradise and all this other stuff for decades now, had a short run on Marvel, and it's thoroughly disinteresting, you know? So it is interesting how, for some creators, certain things work and others don't. And it's not just a matter of getting on it and being a decent creator or storyteller. You've got to evidently have an affinity to and a viewpoint on the characters, or you're not gonna make anything interesting.
Yeah, and so I think that would be interesting. I think there'd have to be a bunch of research that would need to be done kind of ahead of time to figure out, who the creators are, and then like what's considered their best, and then maybe the stuff that didn't work, and then reading both of it, and then sort of comparing, contrasting, and trying to decide, why it works so well here and didn't work here. Could take a while to do, but it's an interesting idea.
And sometimes it's combinations too. People love Jack Kirby, but there is a dark truth to the fact that Jack Kirby, working alone without Stan Lee, never had a series go more than 12 issues without getting canceled. And Jack Kirby, having his work destroyed by Stan Lee, created a century of issues of Fantastic Four and a bunch of other stuff that have been some of the most important comics of all time. So there are weird things like that too. Sometimes it's the combinations that are interesting in when they work and when they don't.
Yeah, that just reminds me of those Eternal books. Oh my god.
Yep.
Oh man. I don't think I'm ever going to forget those, not in a good way, actually.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry I did that to you.
That's all right. I mean, I wouldn't have known, but now I do. So stay away. I'm just gonna say stay away. It's not worth it. But Amanda, thank you so much for the email. We really appreciate it. Again, at the end of the show, we'll talk about where you can send emails to us. We're on social media as well. Please reach out to us. Give us your thoughts on what we should do next. And we're still brainstorming ideas. We haven't finalized anything as of yet. All right, Dan, with that, I think we move in and we talk about the year for Daredevil.
That sounds fantastic.
The year in Daredevil.
All right, Dwayne. So we've now moved into 2012. Daredevil is steaming along in Volume 3, a run that he's got a couple of different people working with him on here. You're going to talk about all of those guys and the like. He also had some other appearances out there. Where did Daredevil find himself in this year of Marvel Comics? And then in the main run, you've also got for us who was actually working on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, so first off, I'm going to say this year kind of started to suck from the standpoint of figuring out what books were actually in this year. Because if you go into Marvel Unlimited, they have like a published date, not a cover date on it. And so it was really difficult to figure out where the year started and where the year ended for the Daredevil Volume 3 run this year. But having looked it up, because we have a spreadsheet that kind of goes through all the appearances and stuff, Daredevil Volume 3 is issues 6 through 19 this year. But you had to read more than that in order to fully understand what was going on this year, because he had not one, but two crossover stories that ended up, part of the story ended up in another title. One of them was a two-parter with Spider-Man, and another was a three-parter with Spider-Man and the Punisher. And that one actually is our spotlight story this week. So we're going to be looking at Daredevil Volume 3, 6 through 19. The start of the Daredevil End of Days began. The first issue of that was very late in the year. He also appeared in Fantastic Four issue 600. He was in the New Avengers 2019 through 24, and then back for issues 30 and 31. Amazing Spider-Man 677, which is part of that two-parter. Punisher, issues 7 and 10. He was in Avengers number 24, Avengers versus X-Men, issues 1 through 4, and 7 through 9. He was in Avenging Spider-Man number 6, Hulk number 50. AVX versus AVXVS number 2. I'm not familiar with what that is. What is that, Dan?
That's Avengers versus X-Men.
Okay.
Is the over and then the actual title itself was just called Versus.
Versus. Okay, so it's another Avengers versus X-Men.
It's part of the Avengers versus X-Men crossover.
Okay. There was a Daredevil annual number 1, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe number 4, and Secret Avengers issue number 33. So he's starting to ramp up more and more appearances, but still not like a few years ago where he was basically everywhere. As far as creators on the main Daredevil run, Mark Waid was the writer across all these books. And we had a number of artists across these books. Marcos Martin was issue 6. Paolo Rivera did issues 7, 9, and 10. We had someone named Kano who did issue number 8. We had Khoi Pham doing a 10.1 issue as well as issue 13. Marco Checchetto did issue 11. And the main guy that did art this year, though, or did like half of the books, was Chris Samnee. He did issues 12, 14 through 16, and 18 and 19. And then Mike Allred did issue number 17. And most of these pencilers did their own inking. We've talked about Paolo Rivera had his father, Joe Rivera, doing his inking for those books. So those were the creators. So we had actually kind of a big turnover in creators this year, a lot of different art styles throughout this year.
Yeah, it's weird looking at it and just seeing how writer is just one guy, and then the artists are this vomit of like 100 names. So
seven different pencilers this year.
It's difficult to see how you would maintain continuity, and the fact that this book won awards is even stranger to me when you start thinking of how difficult it is to maintain quality when you're constantly trying to, break in new people and things like this. So, yeah, very interesting.
And that's not taking into the account that you'd had different, while Mark Waid did the writing on those other books, the crossover books, like Avenging's, I think it was Avenging Spider-Man 677, not Amazing Spider-Man 677. No, it was Amazing. Never mind.
Yeah. It's amazing if it's got that number on it.
Yeah, okay. But there was a different penciler and inker on those books as well. So it is. There was a number of people that were drawing Daredevil this year in kind of that main storyline. As for what happened this year, so 2012 begins with the last couple books of that Omega Drive story that we talked about 2 weeks ago. We had mega crime organizations that are all vying for it, and that mutually assured destruction stalemate at the end of the story that allowed Daredevil and his friends to get out of a sticky situation, but also left a target on Daredevil's back. We fast forward to March. We get a 2-part story that starts in Amazing Spider-Man 677 called The Devil in the Details. In it, we see Peter Parker lamenting his recent breakup with Charlie Cooper, trying to be cool with Black Cat, which goes absolutely horribly, and then seeks out Matt Murdock and Daredevil when Black Cat gets arrested and seemingly framed for breaking in and stealing something from a lab. She says she's been framed for the break-in at Horizon Labs. Now, after Black Cat breaks out of police custody, the three locate the inventor of this stolen holographic projector. He's been poisoned and has little time to live. Spider-Man rushes him to the hospital while Black Cat and Daredevil secure the projector from members of Black Spectre, and in the process basically removing them from a threat going forward as somebody going after that Omega Drive. As a quote unquote reward for helping, Black Cat and Daredevil passionately kiss, with Spider-Man looking on and saying one of the best lines ever, quote, "I think this is my supervillain origin," unquote. They go back to Matt's place, but before anything happens, he's called away to the graveyard of his father, where some weird things are going on, specifically that his and other graves have been emptied. So that is this story with Spider-Man Black Cat was kind of fun and sort of ridiculous.
That is Black Cat.
Yeah, is it? This is, I think, the first story I've read with Black Cat in it.
Yeah, she's like a Catwoman variant for the Marvel Universe, who is just hypersexualized all the time, it seems. And she's always, well, she really is like the Marvel version of Daredevil in a lot of ways. So it makes sense that they would get together, because she always sort of ends up, romance in the co-stars. But her and Peter Parker have had a thing for a while. Now, that's largely past, I believe. There's a lot of times now where Black Cat and like Mary Jane are sort of BFFs and the like, but she has spent a good part of her career being sometimes the criminal, sometimes the hero, always kind of, again, like Catwoman, kind of in that gray area.
Yeah. So. Okay. But yeah, it just felt like weird that they're sort of romancing each other, and then to have Peter Parker sort of just watching on, and like I said, I saw the line, "I think this is my supervillain origin," and it was just like, oh my god, this is so perfect.
Yeah, those two have been star-crossed for a long time, but I think they dated actually for a while. I don't know when that was over, but obviously it's not currently. So no. There you go.
No. So this graveyard thing, this leads us into the next story that involves heading underground in a confrontation with Mole Man. Mole Man is stealing coffins to try and find the love of his life, Lorna, who he loved as Dr. Harvey Elder, and wants to be with now, despite the fact that she has passed away. Daredevil ultimately saves the body of Lorna and some diamonds, I guess, because he's basically turning over all these different coffins looking for her, and returns to the surface. Upon going home, he reads a note from Black Cat admitting she was hired to steal the Omega Drive from him, but doesn't, and then warns him to watch his back. So this story here, I think, was sort of almost the bridge too far when it came to, I just did not enjoy this story at all when it was trying to just get through it, because the whole idea of, these like, I think he called them like Molites or something. It's all these
Molites.
Yeah,
the Molites are his.
Yeah.
If you think of like Gru and the Minions, they really almost are like derived from, in many ways, I think, the Mole Man and his Molites. And they're essentially a subterranean race that he went down and somehow became the king of, and then he now protects and rules over them and the like. So.
Yeah, so he was telling them to go basically steal a whole bunch of coffins, bring them back. They're rummaging through all these coffins of dead people, looking for the one body of the woman that he loves. And he's not going to try and like resurrect her or anything. He just wants her down there with him. And like at one time, it's like Daredevil even asks, like, "Are you going to try and resurrect her or something?" And he's like, "No, that's weird. Who would do that? I just want to be with her. She needs to be with me." And it's just like, ew, this is weird.
Yeah, awkward considering Daredevil was, just trying to resurrect somebody a couple of months ago, and
yeah,
he obviously didn't mention that. But yeah, this was not a story that I really enjoyed. It was, I think the technical term is sort of icky in terms of the content and that whole. that coffins are essentially being stolen from underneath, like carrots plucked out from beneath by Bugs Bunny in one of the comics or something like this.
Uh-huh.
And then they're thoroughly disrespecting the bodies and everything and just making a mess of everything down there. I didn't think this was a good look for Mole Man because he's not normally crazy in that way. He's a lot of times sort of like Namor is sort of trying to protect the seas and the like. Mole Man has that protective characteristic of the subterranean. So I find it a little weird, but yeah, these are not my two favorite stories. I
Yeah.
would agree that this is sort of a low point in terms of it just really didn't really do it for me.
Yeah. Okay. I was just like this isn't the part that was that like these are award winning books like the whole run in a lot of cases, but I don't think these specifically are award winning books in my opinion.
So now, did we miss the award-winning book, by the way? Because we're doing number 6 through 19 here, right? Did we talk about 7, or is 7 going to be the spotlight?
I did forget that, it looks like.
So that's one that we should probably mention because that's a story that essentially it's set within the time when yes, Foggy and Matt are sort of sitting around. Uh, Matt is looking at the Omega Drive and everything. Foggy's like, "Hey, you gonna come on out here?" And then it turns out there's like a Christmas party going on, and he's dressed up in a sweater, his famous sweater, the "I'm Not Daredevil" sweater, which I don't know. Did you know I had this?
I did not know you had that.
I have an actual pop figure of Daredevil wearing the "I'm Not Daredevil" sweater.
Sweater, yeah.
But the nice thing about this is that then that moves into him going out and taking a school bus full of blind kids on a field trip during the holidays.
Yes.
Deer runs in front of the road. The bus crashes. I think the driver's dead, actually, but all the kids survive. And then Daredevil has to try and get them to safety.
Yeah, navigate them to safety. And it's actually I think the driver lived and then just ran off. Like you kids are on your own. I'm gonna save myself is what I think ended up happening.
Oh no.
It's not a good look for the bus driver.
That really isn't a good look at all. So yeah, if that's the case, then in any case, they're out in the middle of nowhere, there's a big blizzard, so nobody's driving. And what essentially happens is that initially Matt tries to save the kids. Like, everybody grab onto this piece of twine or whatever, and we're going to make a procession and find someplace. But then eventually they end up saving him instead.
Yes.
That's kind of a cool inverted tale where the hero is actually the kids that he's trying to save. And there is no bad guy in it. There's a lot of beautiful art of them just sort of walking through the blizzard.
Yeah, trudging through the snow.
And yeah, it's a very quiet story.
It sort of comes out of left field because you've had all this sort of breakneck action for quite a while, and this, to your point, there's no villain. There's just him on a bus with some kids, and he's volunteering to take them to like a ski trip or something, and then there's the bus crash, and then he tries to save them, and then they end up saving him. It was unexpected, but it was just nice. And to your point, the art looked great in it, and it was fun seeing, because he actually switches into the Daredevil costume at one point. So there's him in the Daredevil costume in front, and then this like line of kids walking behind him, trudging through the snow as the snow's coming down. It just it was just sort of cute.
No, and it really is, the art by Rivera is just gorgeous, and it feels cold. So the coloring is really
Yes.
really excellent in this, everything, and it does just have this sort of stark, silent kind of feel to it. You can almost hear twigs snapping and the wind. I really love this story. I like it when superhero comics every once in a while find a way to take that break and just let the characters in the story breathe a little bit. So
To be frank, I think maybe this was my turning point on Mark Waid. I truly believe that if that like up until this point, I was not really on board with Mark Waid and his storytelling, it because of just sort of the craziness, and then like the way the story about the mutually assured destruction thing. But then we
yes,
have this, and it just sort of, I don't know, it sort of kind of reset my thinking on him, and so then I was just like, I started to buy in, I guess, more, and really started to see, okay, yeah, I see why this is so good. I see what other people are seeing now when it comes to Mark Waid on Daredevil.
yeah. And it really is a reset, kind of like in terms of we had all that stuff going on and the just absolute nuttiness of you're going to let me walk out of here even though you've all got guns on me and everything else, into sort of a different set of stories and the like. And even though the one they first went into being Mole Man, that was not, like I said, something I really loved. I think that this one really did, bring back kind of that idea of Daredevil as somebody who is out in the community doing things, of him as a person instead of just sort of all of his assorted problems. So, yeah, high marks. And it did win for Daredevil this year, won for Best Continuing Series, the Eisner, and this issue in particular, issue number 7, the story with the kids, won for Best Individual Issue for the year. Something I don't think Marvel had ever won.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember us ever talking about Marvel winning, best issue, best single story. All right. As we press on, sorry about missing that a little bit earlier in our discussion. After a 10.1 book that acts as a lead up, we get a 3-part crossover where Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Punisher team up in order to protect the Omega Drive from those mega crime organizations, with each book getting part of the story titled The Omega Effect. This story, pretty big in its importance, I think, kind of setting things up. So it is going to be our spotlight story for this week. So we will talk about it in much more detail in just a little bit. But
excellent.
So as we move forward from that, after that story, The Omega Effect, we get a one-shot story showing Matt Murdock and Kirsten McDuffie on a date. They go to like Coney Island or something and play skee ball and do all that sort of thing. And they seem to be hitting it off and things are going really well. All until a Black Spectre agent shows up and threatens the pair, saying, I want that Omega Drive and I'm going to get it from you. And then just sort of disappears, freaking Kirsten McDuffie out to like no end, which, having not probably been, approached by some like agent of a major crime organization and threatened, I could probably see why she would be a little unnerved by that.
That's why Milla was always weird, was that Milla was sort of the partner that never actually freaked out no matter how much crazy stuff went around. There was
lots of crazy stuff going on.
Most normal people would have ran away long before she did. And obviously that was the right call because it wasn't a great idea for her to stick around as long as she did. So
right.
There we go. But yeah, so reasonably so. Most people are going to find this a little bit crazy. There's also the rest of the story to this we'll find out later, but I'll let you just get to that.
Yes. So in turn, this then leads to a giant battle in the middle of Times Square featuring himself, with the Omega Drive. For some reason, he like actually puts it on like this chain around his neck and then starts flying around Times Square with it on, inviting trouble. And these four mega crime organizations all have representatives, and while all the events of this fight are being broadcast throughout the city.
Yep.
The fight ends with the Black Spectre agent securing the drive and then leaving. This seems terrible, right? This seems like, oh my God, worst case scenario. Daredevil, what are you doing? But later, Daredevil kicks down the door of the Avengers mansion, where members of the new Avengers, Wolverine, Mockingbird, Spider-Man, Iron Fist, and Luke Cage, are changing out of their Black Spectre uniforms, and we learn the fight in Times Square was staged and that the drive is going to be destroyed. And they were using the Black Spectre as sort of a ghost because he had already sort of taken out Black Spectre earlier this year during that Black Cat story. So he's got the other crime organizations focused on Black Spectre that doesn't really exist, trying to get the Omega Drive, while they actually have the Omega Drive and they're going to destroy it.
Yep, because his problem was he couldn't give it back to them, but he also couldn't keep it forever, because as long as he kept it, there was always going to be kind of this, like target on him. And
Yes.
if he decided to give it to somebody or do something like that, then it would also seem like the other ones are going to take vengeance. So he found a way to just have it stolen from him and pass the target off to somebody else.
Yeah. It's actually rather ingenious, but at the same time, it was a little crazy how it sort of played out.
Yep.
So, Dan, turns out there are repercussions for losing Latveria a whole bunch of laundered money. And Daredevil, after getting rid of the Omega Drive, ends up getting abducted and being brought to Castle Doom in Latveria by the Minister of Bank, Chancellor Executor Beltran. So he's held there for a while, then tries and fails in an escape attempt. And then Daredevil eventually ends up getting breaking free again and making it so that he could contact the Avengers. So the Avengers actually come and rescue him, but not before some nanobots are injected into him, causing all of him to lose all of his senses. So he, like,
his hypersenses.
Yes, his hypersenses sort of like kind of dissipated because of these nanobots, and that's actually why his first escape attempt didn't work. He actually started to lose the radar vision and all that. And he actually thought maybe he had gotten out of the country, and rather than falling just short of it before he was recaptured.
Yep.
It's actually quite crazy.
Yeah. He's been stuck in that castle a couple times now, because you remember there was a time when Dr. Doom changed brains with him. And
That's
then he was
right.
stuck in Doom's castle as well. So it might have even been another time, I can't remember, where he was stuck in this weird room and had to find his way out. He was like on the ceiling or something. So, but yeah, so he's got to be used to that place.
It's definitely not unknown territory, that's for sure. Nope. So the Avengers and Daredevil make it back to America. Hank Pym shrinks to micro size and enters Murdock's brain to fight the nanobites with the guidance of Doctor Strange, because, Doctor Strange is a brain surgeon. Despite some weird readings, Pym successfully destroys all the nanobots, and Murdock's senses start to return to normal. Later, Murdock returns to Nelson and Murdock law offices, where he's confronted by Foggy Nelson saying he's found Matt's secret, showing him Jack Murdock's remains and boxing gloves in Matt's desk. Now, why that's important is during that whole graveyard mole man story, Jack Murdock's remains and coffin basically disappeared as part of that. And like part of the reason he went down there was to try and find Jack Murdock's remains. But when he escaped with Lorne on the diamonds, he didn't actually find Jack Murdock's remains or anything.
Yeah, and according to Mole Man, he's like, yeah, I didn't really worry about who they were or what. We just threw them away when we were done.
Yeah.
Who really cares about it? And it was a weird thing to say, but he's just like, we have no respect for him. We just threw him in a pile. So there's no way to know at that point which of the hundreds of skeletons that were down there was any one particular person's.
Yes. So as far as Matt was concerned, the body was the remains were gone. He was never going to ever see them again. So this comes as a surprise. A stunned Matt tries to tell Foggy he didn't rob his own father's grave and that he's been set up, but Foggy will hear none of it, telling Matt that they're through until Matt gets the help he needs. So we have another Matt and Foggy have broken up. The law firm is no longer a partnership anymore.
Where were you at on this when you first saw it? Did you believe that he, in fact, had not done it? Because we weren't. I mean, when it happens, we don't have really the information to know if Matt's been doing something in his spare time that we don't know about. Did you think that he'd actually done this goofy thing, or did you already suspect that someone was behind it?
I think I didn't think I did not think he actually did it. No, I thought this seemed like something somebody would do to try and set him up and cause chaos in his life. Right. I did not. Maybe it's more that I was hoping that this wasn't something that he was capable of doing, rather than thinking that. But yeah, that's where I was at. I was thinking that this was not actually, because to me, I guess the fact that just kind of the way the Mole Man story had worked and just how stunned Matt was when Foggy reveals the secret. Like, we actually find out that Matt has this, or Foggy finds Matt's secret actually several issues before he gets abducted and goes to Latveria. So we've had to sit on this wondering what this is for the better part of 3 books until we finally get find out what it is that Foggy found that shook him so much.
Because he opens the drawer, but we don't see what's in the drawer. We just see his horrified face.
And he's like, "Oh, Matt, what have you done?" And you're just like, "Oh my God, what has he done?"
Yep.
And then when you find out what it is, you're like, "Oh my God, Matt, what have you done?" That is actually sort of crazy.
No, not good. Not good at all.
All right, so as we continue, after a flashback story involving Stiltman, we see Nelson and Murdock still at odds over Jack Murdock's remains. Foggy's worried that Matt's mental state has increased because Matt calls him and says that Mila Donovan is in his apartment, unaware that anything bad has ever happened to her. Nelson agrees to go to the hospital where Mila has been committed if Daredevil will look into a case involving a drug lord dying and an innocent nurse accused of murder. So, yeah, he's actually on a date with Kirsten. They arrive at his apartment, his house, and he hears somebody in there and basically sort of I gotta go. I hope you had a nice night. And basically just shuts the door on her and then goes into the apartment and there she is. And she's acting as if nothing has happened. And he's completely freaked out about it because, hey, she's supposed to be committed in a hospital somewhere upstate. And now she's currently, in his apartment. So he calls Foggy and is like, "Hey, can you look in to see if she's actually what's going on? How is she here?" And he's like, "I said we're done. We're done. I'm not doing this." But he's been talking to like the brother of the nurse comes to see Foggy, and we hit this story about this drug lord and the nurse that's being accused of murder, and so sort of a quid pro quo. I'll go look into Mila if you'll look into this, and we'll exchange notes then afterwards.
Yeah. No, I found this really strange, but it was interesting that, you know, they do touch in every once in a while on things that had happened before. I do like this, that it's not just we're going to forget completely, because it kind of felt for a while like they just forgot that any other previous Daredevil issues had been published, right?
Yeah.
It was really clean. Also, though, I think that, you know, when you talk about like the Stiltman appearance and stuff like that, that was one of the things that even in the letter columns, people were like, you know, I love the fact that you're going back to the old school. Just please, God, no Stiltman or any of this other crazy stuff, you know? So I'm pretty sure that he put Stiltman in just as kind of everybody's expecting me to do a Stiltman piece to mess with them sort of thing.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not have Stiltman showing up in a Daredevil 2012 book on my bingo card going into the year.
No.
All right, so the year ends with Foggy telling Matt that he must have been hallucinating Mila because he can see her inside her room at the hospital. Daredevil goes looking in search of one of the drug lord's suspects, a man by the name of Salazar, and breaks in on him. There's some fighting from him and some of the henchmen. Salazar goes taking off, trying to flee Daredevil, and seemingly falls down an elevator shaft trying to escape. That leads Daredevil dropping in on one of the only other drug lord's sort of mini bosses or right-hand bosses as he tries to consolidate power, a guy by the name of Anthony Tortino. Daredevil tries to warn the men about their common enemy, but things quickly turn south. Daredevil believes it's the Spot who's been doing all of this, and we see these black portals and that. And if you remember, Spot was in the very first Mark Waid book, and he actually stops a mob boss's daughter from being abducted by the Spot on her wedding day, if you remember right. And so we start to see the circles and all this sort of thing. So Daredevil jumps into one of the circular black portals after Tortino, but ends up getting knocked out. He awakens to find his hands being cuffed behind a post. Daredevil shouts in rage that Spot is a dead man, but these like black hands that abducted him are holding his detached head at the torso of this body of this seemingly new villain who introduces himself as the Coyote. And that's where the year ends, is actually a full page panel of the Coyote, this guy that sort of looks like Spot, but basically is in an all black costume, and has this like really sort of jaggedy mouth sort of thing, and these really like, I almost want to say like Venom looking eyes. And he is holding Daredevil's head, and under it is like this like gray collar thing that presumably is how the head is still alive, or how the body is still alive, is that he's sort of somehow keeping them connected by way of this gray collar thing. So,
well, I think he's just made a portal, and the portal splits the person's head in half, or so you can take the head, and that is also, I mean, not to go too far into next year, but just as a note, the Coyote is named such partly because they're doing human trafficking, right? And so, essentially, that's what he's doing. He's taking people's heads off so that he can more easily keep them quiet and package them while he's transporting them across various premises.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Now, is this the Spot why he couldn't just throw the whole person through the portal into wherever they need to go? I don't know. They needed to have some, complex villainous plot. So that's what's occurred.
Yeah, so we end the year in a very interesting and a very precarious situation for Daredevil as the year ends. This is but yeah, this is crazy. And like overall, I think I did like these story, like the year of this year of Mark Waid I liked quite a bit more than last year.
Yep. I have liked both years. I think that the Mole Man story was a serious misstep. The story with the kids in the snow was a high point. I also liked seeing Daredevil and Black Cat together. I think that was kind of a cool pairing. Uh, and Kristen McDuffie, I think has been a nice addition to the cast. So
Yeah, I
it's
would
been a good
agree.
year. Mm-hmm.
I will say one of the other things that I think ended up causing me to really like this year is I really like Chris Samnee's art.
Yes, Chris
It
Samnee is
is
fantastic.
he there is something about the art, and I think I was going to try and figure out what I sort of liked it about it, and one of the things that I read was that it kind of takes its influence from the silver age of comics in a lot of ways, and I see that, I think, in that, like, it reminds me of, like, say, a Gene Colan sort of art in a lot of ways. There's, I think, other influences that um I was reading that suggested, like, Darwin Cook, John Romita Sr., Frank Miller are some of the influences that that you could potentially see from Chris Samnee's art. But I liked a lot of those people.
Yeah, and the thing about Samney is, there's that idea that if you use enough lines, it's easier to make something look decent in art, right? But when you only want to have a very sort of minimalist kind of look to your art, then everything has to be right and almost perfect. And he has this fluid style that is just so simple and beautiful. And he uses shadow well. Everybody moves really well. It's interesting to see the difference between him and, I really like Marco Checchetto, but to see Checchetto's art there in issue number 11, kind of just up next to then getting Samnee in the next issue, it's really a study in contrasts, you know. But yeah, his stuff is fantastic, and he's continued to be a top artist. Who basically, if you see anything he's doing, it's probably going to be pretty good. So
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was like some of the stories were resonating with me better, and I think I liked, like, the art in the latter half of the year too. Even on so even if the stories ended up being a little convoluted, the art still made it really interesting. And then, like I said, that last full page panel with the introduction of the coyote and Daredevil's head, the disembodied head just hanging out, I
yep.
think was a really great end of the year.
And the nice thing, of course, is it's a good thing you like Chris Samnee's art because he's with us for the rest of this entire volume 3, and he's the artist to start up volume 4 as well.
Nice. I'll
So
take that.
yeah, so we're going to be with him for a while.
Very cool. All right, Dan, do we have anything else we want to chat about, or should we move on and talk about the spotlight? Because there is, like, a 3-part story that we do have to get through.
You go for it, man. Bring it on.
All right, let's talk about the spotlight for this week. This week's spotlight story.
All right, Dwayne. As usual, you get to roll the idea of what the spotlight is, and you have chosen to pick a story that is 2/3 not Daredevil.
Yeah.
Just to
Well,
sort of.
it's 3 parts Daredevil. It's just 2 of the 3 parts didn't actually appear in Daredevil Volume 3.
Exactly. So this is going to be a spotlight on Avenging Spider-Man number 6 from June of 2012, Punisher number 10, and Daredevil number 11. So all three of these then go together into a single storyline that kind of builds as we go along. Tell us about it, sir.
Yeah. All right. So this is the Omega Effect. And it begins with Spider-Man is called in by Reed Richards to retrieve the Omega Drive from Daredevil, which contains data on major crime syndicates. Daredevil refuses to turn it over, believing he can keep it safe. Meanwhile, the Punisher and his partner, Marine veteran Rachel Cole Alves, confronts Daredevil for the drive, but he also refuses them as well. Their standoff is interrupted by a hand attack, forcing the three to all work together to try and battle and prevent the hand from coming and taking the Omega Drive. So basically everybody who's anybody wants this Omega Drive right now. Afterwards, Spider-Man convinces Daredevil and the Punisher to work together. And that what they're going to do is they're going to draw out the crime organizations, then destroy the Omega Drive publicly to remove it as a target. So we know, however, that this doesn't actually end up coming to pass based on the year in review, but that was the plan that they had for this story. Daredevil agrees, and the Punisher reluctantly accepts Spider-Man's demands for no casualties as part of this whole process.
No killing.
Yes, no killing.
Lots of casualties. People are still going to get viciously hurt, just not murdered.
I think...
Isn't it?
Casualties are deaths, aren't they?
No.
Yes. A person killed or injured in war or accident.
Correct. It's just that normally both Spider-Man and the Punisher have casualties. It's just Spider-Man's casualties make it alive to the hospital.
There we go.
And the Punishers do not.
Yes, no killing. There are going to be plenty of injuries. That is for sure. The Spider-Man and Daredevil copy key information from the drive to give Punisher to give Reed Richards, while the Punisher and Rachel Cole Alves prepare for a battle with non-lethal weaponry. So I love the fact that they're going to work together. It then makes sense why this book is, or this story is in Spider-Man and it's in the Punisher as well. And I love the fact that it's like anytime it feels like every time we end up encountering the Punisher, Dan, you and I, when we're reading stories, it's always with somebody that has kind of we don't kill around these parts, and then they have to get, the Punisher to agree to not killing people in order for the partnership to continue.
Yes. And yet they never bring him in or anything like that afterwards. So they work with the guy who's murdered hundreds of people, murdered more people than pretty much any of the actual villains that they fight against. And then they're like, see you later, Frank.
Yeah.
We'll have a beer in a couple of weeks here when I'm not so busy.
Right.
And it's just very strange.
All right. So as this continues, so over the course of one night, the team sabotages these mega crime operations throughout the city and spreading the message to meet them at Grand Central Station, where they can presumably take on the group once and for all and maybe potentially get that Omega Drive that they've been so highly sought after for. Now, during the mission at Grand Central Station, when they have this big sort of major battle, Rachel Cole Alves struggles with her desire for vengeance against one of the mega crime organizations called the Exchange. They are a group responsible for her husband's death. She actually is thinking about, starting to break the no killing rule, but Daredevil then warns her not to become like the people who killed her husband. So she's like, there's one point where she's like, actually getting like real bullets out, and she's getting ready and she starts aiming, and then Daredevil kind of intercedes and is like, don't do this, don't be that person, you'll regret it, all this sort of thing, and basically talks her down from doing this.
And this is a character, by the way, whose story has been evolving all through the Punisher books. So since we're in the Punisher storyline, this is a character from that new volume of Punisher that she's been a regular during that storyline. So she's kind of like, you know, his super angry sidekick Robin type of person for this part of the story.
That makes sense. I was assuming as much, and so yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right, so as the story continues, we get to Grand Central Station, where representatives of all these mega crime syndicates have gathered for this ultimate fight over the Omega Drive. Now, just as the plan had stated, Daredevil tosses the Omega Drive into the air with the idea to destroy it, but ends up getting shot by Rachel Cole Alves, who then takes the drive before he can actually destroy it. The fighting keeps going, and then things end up dying down, so Daredevil can track down Rachel and try to talk her into handing over the drive so that they can destroy it like they talked about. But before she can hand it over, they're ambushed by some Hydra agents. Spider-Man and Frank Castle come in and help them beat those Hydra agents. And though Rachel was shot during the fight, she survives thanks to a bulletproof vest and ends up escaping without the drive and leaves behind this rubber bullet, proving that she wasn't actually trying to kill Daredevil when she shot at him. So their plans are ruined. There's no audience left to witness this drive's destruction like they've talked about as part of their plan. Daredevil decides once again that he's going to end up keeping the Omega Drive for now and promises Spider-Man they'll find yet another solution to try and to get rid of the drive once and for all. The Punisher ends up leaving just satisfied he's had a night full of fighting with the various crime organizations, which I just think is great because he reluctantly agrees not to kill anyone, ends up getting to fight and injure a whole bunch of people, and despite the fact he came in being like, I want the drive, ends up being like, okay, well, I guess we're good for now. You can keep the drive, and then I'm happy I got to maim a bunch of people, so I'm good to go. So that is the Omega effect, and I thought going into it, I thought it was going to be sort of a we're going to finally deal with the Omega Drive once and for all. It looked like they were going to deal with the Omega Drive once and for all, and then the rug kind of got pulled out from under us at the end of the story, and we still have the Omega Drive to deal with.
There you go. That was a lot.
There was a lot of story packed into 3 books.
And that also felt like a very sort of like classic 70s sort of going in and everybody getting involved in a weird little caper kind of thing. That, you know, it had high stakes, but not really a lot of... I didn't feel particularly worried most of the time, the way you sometimes do during a Bendis or a Brubaker story when things could go to hell at any point. It seemed like it's going to probably work out, you know? So
yeah, it didn't work out exactly the way they planned, but it basically worked out fine. I mean, there's nobody that's really that much more hurt or anything than they were going into this whole thing, and the Omega Drive is not in any danger of falling into enemy hands or anything like that. So we basically just had a big crossover book where 3 big heroes got to work together, and basically at the end, status quo from before the crossover happened at the end of the crossover. Like, nothing has changed.
Yep, that is correct. Very much, which is also a essentially, you know, hallmark of classic Marvel is much ado about nothing.
Yes, so. we got a lot of action, we got entertained, but ultimately nothing of any consequence actually happened. Like
That is correct.
nothing that like changes the story going forward.
No. But there you go. Yeah, that's the spotlight, and covers the year.
Yeah. I I I liked it. Like as far as like sort of crazy stories go and like fun sort of crossovers go, I think this definitely played well. These were all books that were released in June that year, so you didn't have to wait a long time to really find out what happened. This
Yep.
was all this got resolved all in the month of June. These all three books came out the same month. You could have picked them all up at your comic book store, and you had the full story over the course of a couple weeks.
Correct. It's a beautiful thing. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
I think
those things should work. And there's something there. I think these all did come out. This was a time when Marvel was doing a pretty good job of hitting their deadlines and getting things out, getting things done. Despite all of the craziness that we talked about, there weren't a lot of disruptions in the actual supply chain at this point, I don't think.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So when I was going through and I was thinking about what books to spotlight there, I very easily maybe should have picked the snow story, the kids outing. That would have been a good story to spotlight too. But I thought like this was going to be, at least when I was starting to read it, I thought, oh, okay, so this is gonna finish the Omega Drive story. So this should obviously be the spotlight. But then turns out it didn't actually end up dealing with that, and they end up dealing with it a completely different way in sort of a kind of crazy way. But
yeah, do what they do.
Yeah. All right, Dan, should we do some rapid fire Daredevil questions?
I like it. All right, sir. So first off, who is Matt Murdock in love with this year?
So it seems he has a new love interest this year. The assistant district attorney, Kirsten McDuffie, seems to be the one. I mean, he has a date. The entire book this year is a date with those two getting together. Though, I mean, that Black Cat sort of situation was, there was some interest there as well, I would say.
Yeah, he is a couple of infatuations. I don't know that he's necessarily got anyone that you'd say he's actually attached to at this point.
Right.
So that will change probably next year, I think, is what we're looking at. But as of right now, he is single and playing the field. So,
in typical Matt Murdock fashion, too. Like it's never just one. He's always got a couple people he's sort of interested in at any one time.
Yep. So speaking of which, looks like he's got a couple of villains that he's interested in this year as well. What do you have for our biggest villain of the year?
So the year begins with those mega crime organizations, and it kind of comes back to that throughout the year during the Omega Effect and that. But obviously, by the time the year ends, it's the Coyote. I mean, with everything that's sort of going on. And the fact that he's being held captive by this new villain, definitely feels like the Coyote is going to be the big threat going forward.
Little mole man in the middle of the year, just to switch things up. So, did we see Matt practicing any law this year?
No, in fact, it's actually quite the opposite, given the fact that he was fired by Foggy Nelson from their law firm this year. Yeah. So the fact that he's got fired means he probably isn't going to be practicing much law anytime soon.
Yeah. Yep, that is unfortunate. Keeps happening to him, too, so start to think that he's maybe doing something wrong. Anybody new know Matt's identity?
No. This is still the open secret. I to your point though, I love the I'm not Daredevil sweatshirt. That is our holiday shirt.
There's also a point after he negotiates the release from the mega crime, like 5 guys, where one of the guys as they're going out is like, "Man, you'd make a great lawyer." And he's talking to one of the other guys, and he's like, "Don't say anything at all, not a word."
Yeah.
So, is Daredevil still a good guy this year?
So I said he seems to be, but at this point, there seems to be some hallucinations or something going on. The idea of like those remains in his desk and Mila showing up at his apartment, and we don't know if these things are actually real or how they got there. And so I said that sort of stuff sort of gives me pause, and I don't know entirely. Like by the end of the year, during that last issue, Daredevil is convinced that all of these things that have happened to him, the remains, Mila, all of that stuff, he suspects it's the Spot that's doing this, and he's convinced that he's going to confront the Spot, and the Spot's going to presumably reveal that yeah, he was behind all of this stuff, and whether or not it's this coyote or not, I guess that's what he probably thinks, and it'll be interesting to see if that actually is the case.
So, I mean, but as sort of a level set, is he currently engaged in running any ninja death cults?
he is not currently head of the hand, or possessed by any sort of beast that is hell bent on taking down humanity. No.
So he's much better than previous years at this point. So
yes, definitely.
How about the Daredevil costume? That change at all this year?
Nothing jumped out to me this year as being anything new, other than the classic red that he came back to after coming back from out of state.
The thing that keeps getting me now, by the way, is it looks more and more like he wears his costume under his regular street clothes.
Yeah.
Where do the boots come from?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, does he have boots inside his shoes? Because I swear there's a lot of times he's like, oh, I'm going to just, and then somehow boots. And they do not look small,
No,
Joe Quesada used to draw them. They look like military boots.
Yeah,
and a lot of people do.
Yeah, they do.
So this is my question. If anybody knows how the miracle of the Daredevil boots. We learn anything new about Matt's past this year?
So we did have that flashback story with Stiltman, and there was sort of kind of some discuss, like it was in sort of the law offices of it started in the law offices of Nelson and Murdock, and they were talking because it was right after Karen Page left for California, and that, so there was sort of some there was sort of a glimpse of another sort of like this other kind of caper thing that he ends up preventing Stiltman from doing, that we didn't know about before. I don't know if it was anything real substantial, but it was kind of cool to just see another sort of another story involving another one of Daredevil's classic villains.
Well, in issue 12 had the story of young Matt and young Foggy when Foggy just about gets expelled from law school.
Yes.
So we do actually get that kind of another story of the young guys and one of the, how essentially Foggy first became so attached to Matt in many ways.
Yeah.
Where Matt saved his bacon from a angry professor. And then they kind of, he's like, hey, my dad, could probably help us out here because he's got money and I'm still in law school now. So,
right. Yeah. So the crux of that story was that Foggy Nelson submitted a term paper and was accused of plagiarizing it by the professor, who apparently did not like Foggy Nelson at all and wanted to see him get expelled. And so Matt Murdock went to his aid, and they actually kind of confronted him during class and did sort of this mock trial thing, and kind of called him on it and presented evidence and all this sort of thing, and ultimately got the professor to relent and not claim that it was plagiarism, and so Foggy didn't get expelled and all that. And
No.
And so it was a very nice story.
Yep. And that's from Samnee's first issue, and the art is fantastic. It's just
Yes.
it's a gorgeous story. But so I think that would be the only other one I saw. That would be something.
No, that's a good call. That I should have listed as well.
And what was your biggest moment of the year?
To me, it's that last panel, the full page panel featuring the coyote holding Daredevil's detached head. That just, to me, seemed like this is a big moment. I don't know what's going to happen from here, kind of scenario.
To me, it was Daredevil walking out, because in first you've got him sort of sitting in this dark office, being sort of the brooding Matt Murdock that he's been for the last 20 years or whatever, ever since Frank Miller got a hold of him. And then he walks out of the office with his I'm Not Daredevil sweatshirt on, and all these people around for the holiday party. And it's just like you're in a completely different world, and you have to just admit this is not the Daredevil that you knew. You know?
Yeah.
And
no, that makes sense.
I think that, to me, I mean, are there pop figures of, like, you know, the Spot taking Daredevil's head? Huh? Just
No,
the Coyote panel have a pop
no.
figure. So
No.
I think my other favorite moment was when Spider-Man was seeing, like, Matt and the Black Cat making out, and this is my villain origin story.
Yeah,
that was pretty hilarious.
That was my favorite moment of the year. Yes, I didn't think it qualified as the biggest moment of the year, but that was my favorite moment of the year, and probably one of my like top 5 sort of moments of all comic books that I've read. Just something so unexpected, but so just
makes you laugh.
Yeah. Yes, just makes me laugh. Something that I will remember for a very long time after. Long after we stop reading, comics for a podcast.
That's what it's about. Very cool.
All right, Dan, I think we got one more piece of business here. We've got a takeaway to get through. This week's takeaway. All right, Dan, 2012 was a pretty big year. There was a lot going on, some really big movies, some really great Daredevil books. If we look back on 2012 as the year, what do you think's the takeaway that we should think about when we think about 2012?
You know, as I start to read more about this stuff, getting ready for the years and whatever, what I'm starting to find is more and more that the stuff I'm finding about the year is not as much about the year as it is about people reacting online to the year and sort of the outrage about this happened or that happened, and the fact that we're now getting into the years of Comicsgate, and we're getting into the years of a lot of the sort of gatekeeping battles that really start to overwhelm comics in the late 20-teens. And it's kind of interesting, because I think what made me think about this is Mark Waid, because he actually ends up getting sued by someone who believed that for political reasons Waid actually kept them from getting their comic book published by a particular publisher. Essentially, the lawsuit said that Waid essentially encouraged or made some publisher to choose not to publish a book by this particular person. And this sort of stuff starts to just become more and more a part of daily comic book fandom lifestyle. And it's exhausting, So, and obviously it was a lot less exhausting in 2012 than it would be in 2015, than it would be in 2019, than it is now. It just keeps getting worse and worse. But you are starting to see it.
The avalanche started around now, and just keeps getting bigger and bigger as we get closer to present day. Huh?
It's social media really has started to take off at this point. Everybody's got a cell phone. More and more, you've got Twitter and you've got Facebook and these sorts of things becoming a big part of people's everyday lives. And it's just leading more and more to all of these hot takes and people getting their news from weird places and whatever else. And so as I'm going through now, I'm finding more and more um, just stuff that is not necessarily about comics. It is still important because it's a part of what's going on within the industry and within fandom and everything. But a lot of it also is not a lot of fun to read about or to talk about, which is unfortunate. And it wasn't a lot of fun to live through either. So
no, I suppose not.
Some of these I'm remembering and going, oh man, that was a headache. I did not need that. So the other nice thing though is that there are more and more now best of websites out there where you can go back and actually see recaps of what was going on in the history of a particular year and stuff like that that still are extant on the internet. Um, Google's indexing is not as good as it used to be, so it's harder to find some of these stuff, but there still are some out there. And because we don't necessarily have real histories of these years, a lot of those are becoming more and more useful in terms of being able to find the actual content that we need. But that also means I'm running more and more into a lot of the journalistic side and some of those full contact sort of elements with some of the scandals and the outrages of the day. So, yeah.
That's interesting and something I'm going to definitely keep in mind as we go over the next couple years, because yeah, it does seem like we focused. There was definitely talk about that this year, and it's going to be interesting to see how much more that ends up being a part of this whole thing.
Yep. It definitely. There's always been a little bit of this going on, in 2010, when the Thor movie came out, you had a bunch of people angry that there was a Black Heimdall. When Ms. Marvel came out, you had some people who were scoffing at bringing out the female character and things like this. But it's weird because if you go back 10 years or whatever, there was a new character, a black character, female character. There was no outrage at all. People were like, oh, yeah, sounds like it's about time, and now everything is met with resistance. And so it just becomes exhausting.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us for this week. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. If you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get each new episode as soon as it's released. If you've already subscribed, we'd appreciate if you'd share the show via social media or leave us a review. That'll help other new listeners find the show that much easier. Now, whether you're new to the podcast or you've been with us from the beginning, we'd love to get your thoughts on this week's show. Tell us what you liked about the Mark Waid run of 2012. Or any of the MCU or any of the other big movies that happened. We'd love to get your thoughts. You can send us those comments via email. That address is comments@comicsovertime.com. Or you can reach out to us on social media on Blue Sky. We are at Comics Overtime there. Dan, we got a lot accomplished for 2012. I can't imagine it's going to get any easier in 2013.
It's going to remain pretty crazy moving forward. There's a lot going on in comics now, and it is becoming also a lot more fly by night, because now there are publishers more and more, as adaptations happen, who are going to start trying to flood in and get their comics published as a way of essentially getting a screenplay or an idea out to try and get optioned back to Hollywood. So previously Hollywood was rating comics. Now we're going to increasingly start seeing them try to essentially feed things into the comic pipeline so that they can extract them back out, which is just weird.
That is so weird.
Be ready for it.
All right. Until next week, take care, everybody.
All right. See you later, folks.